from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, there's been a lot of conversation again of late on election security. Seems to be a frequent conversation in the hallways the last couple of days, and it's an ongoing issue that I think some people have lost track of, but we have not. Myself and Amy Klobuchar and several others have worked very hard for months on this issue of election security, quietly trying to be able to get the language right and to be able to work through the process of what does it take to be able to secure our elections for 2018, 2020, and beyond, learning the lesson from 2016. But I do want to remind this body that the elections are not something that happens this November. It's already ongoing. Many states' primaries have already been conducted. Last night there was a runoff primary that happened in Alabama. Georgia holds their runoff primaries next week. Tennessee the week after that, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Washington on Tuesday, August the 7th. It's already ongoing. So while we watch the indictments that just came down for the Mueller investigation on GRU officers from Russia that were trying to interfere in our elections in 2016, as we've seen the sanctions and the indictments that have come down on some of the oligarchs from Russia and from the Internet Research Agency for what they were doing in social media, trying to be able to interfere with our election in 2016, I think it may be important for us to be able to do a quick look back to what has happened and to what is still going on and what we're trying to be able to accomplish in the next few weeks. Let me just give a quick look at just what's happening in my state in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, in the 2016 cycle, the FBI and others began to discover that there were issues with the elections and some interference from what they at that time called bad actors in June of 2016. Later that summer, in August of 2016, the FBI issued a nationwide what they call flash alert to every state dealing with a threat from a quote-unquote bad actor. The Oklahoma State Cyber Command Director received that warning, as did everyone else. But at that time, the FBI didn't share any details because no one in my state was given security clearance to be able to have that kind of classified conversation with the FBI. It wasn't until September the 22nd of 2017, a year and a little bit later, that DHS actually notified my state and our state election authorities that we hadn't just been targeted by a bad actor, we had been targeted by the Russians. A year later, because no one had clearance and there was no one engaged. DHS told Oklahoma State Election Board Secretary Paul Zirex, who is doing a great job, that there was evidence that the Russians conducted a surveillance scan looking at the vulnerabilities in the state computer network, but they didn't get into the election board computer network and they didn't get into any of our equipment. They basically came and checked to see if the door was locked, and they found out in Oklahoma the door was locked and the Russians could not get in. They didn't penetrate into our system, though they tried. But it was a year after the elections before we were even notified that the Russians were trying to penetrate our system. A subtle flash warning is all that we received in the summer of 2016. Oklahoma is a great system for elections. Our system is consistent across every single county. We have optical scanners with a paper ballot backup so that we can verify the computer count with a hand count if needed. And we've had a very good system. That system was tested by the Russians when they evaluated the computer networks of our state, and they were also not able to get in. And great thanks to the leadership of some of the cyber and the technology folks that are in Oklahoma. But not all states have the same practices. Some states, from county to county, their election systems are different. From township to township, they may have different systems with different companies and different backgrounds. They may not have the same kind of system that they get a chance to be able to protect their cyber systems. We saw that in 2016 when the Russians were able to penetrate some of these states and actually be able to harvest some of their voter register rolls. They weren't able to change any votes. They weren't able to affect the voting that day, but they did a tremendous amount of scanning through systems to be able to see where there were vulnerabilities, what they could learn on our election systems, and how they could engage for a future time. I think we should learn the lesson from that and be aware that the Russians are trying to be able to penetrate that system and learning as much as they could. At the same time that they were hacking into different systems and testing them out to see if they could get in, a different set of folks from the Russian group, the Internet Research Agency, they were trying to put out social media disinformation. 200,000 Oklahomans saw Facebook and Twitter posts that Russians put out as false information. Excuse me, they weren't all on one candidate. There were multiple candidates and multiple issues. Sometimes on Hillary Clinton, sometimes on Donald Trump, sometimes on Bernie Sanders, sometimes on Jill Stein, sometimes on just ideological issues. But over 200,000 Oklahomans saw those posts from different Russians, not knowing they were Russian posts at all. They were Russians pretending to be Americans, and they were pushing that information out. So what can we learn from this? One is the most simple of those things. You shouldn't believe everything you see on the internet. It's not always an American, it's not always who they post to be, and it's not always true. It should be the most basic information that we should learn about what's happening on the internet, what's online, including Facebook and Twitter. But the other lesson that we need to learn is a little more complicated. We have to be able to have better communication between the federal government and states, better cybersecurity system, and the ability to be able to audit that. That is why Senator Klobuchar and I have worked for months on a piece of legislation called the Secure Elections Act. That piece has worked its way through every state looking at it and their election authorities. We've worked it through multiple committee hearings. In fact, recently, just in the last month, 2 different hearings with the Rules Committee. It is now ready to be marked up and finalized to try to bring to this body. It's a very simple piece. It affirms that states run elections. The federal government should not take over elections nationwide. In fact, that would make a bad situation worse. States need to be able to run elections and be able to manage those. But it qualifies several things. One is it gets security clearance to a person in every single state. So if there is a threat from a hostile actor, there's not some vague warning that comes out. There's an immediate address from what's happening in communication within the intelligence community here on the federal level to individuals with clearance on the state level. Right now, the DHS, in absence of this legislation, has started implementing it anyway. Every single state has at least one person with security clearance now, including my own. And they're working to have at least 3 in every state to do a backup system. We also need to be able to affirm that every state can audit their election, that they would do what's called risk-limiting audits after the election just to check and make sure that the results are correct, but the ability to be able to audit it as the election's going on, so that it's not just counting on a machine, but there's also some way to back it up. Now, states have a variety of ways that they can actually do that. But if elections are trusting that the electronics are going to work and not be hacked into and not be affected, we should have learned the lesson from 2016 that there are outside entities trying to be able to attack these systems and to be able to find vulnerabilities, and they will. Some way to be able to back it up, to be able to audit the election while it's happening. Risk-limiting audits after the fact, security clearances for individuals within states, and rapid communication state to state and state to the federal government all help maintain the integrity of our elections. That's what we do in the Secure Elections Act. And that's why I think it's so important that we try to resolve this as quickly as possible. I encourage this body to finish the markup in the Rules Committee, to be able to bring it to the floor, and to have a consistent bipartisan vote to be able to support the work that we need to continue to do to be able to protect our elections in the days ahead. Our republic is one that maintains its stability based on the integrity of our elections. I have zero doubt the Russians tried to destabilize our nation in 2016 by attacking the core of our democracy. And anyone who believes they will not do it again has missed the basic information that's out day after day after day in our intelligence briefings. But the Russians have done it the first time. They showed the rest of the world the lesson in what could be done. It could be the North Koreans next time. It could be the Iranians next time. It could be a domestic activist group next time. We should learn that lesson, close that vulnerability, and make sure that we protect our systems in the days ahead. There's more that can be done, but the states need to take a lead on this. This is something that the federal government should do. We're very close to getting it done, and I want to be able to tell this body that we're close. Let's work together and to be able to get this done in the days ahead. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.